Welcome. My name's Troy Lambert. I'm a mystery author, editor, and the education lead for Plottr. And today we're going to talk about the W plot. Now, what is the W plot? Well, the W plot is a plot structure that was originally created for screenplays and eventually adapted for novels. It's kind of over the top of a three-act structure, and it contains five different essential beats that you have to have for your story. Now, who should use the W plot? The W plot is actually very good for someone who is just starting out plotting and doesn't like a big architecture and a lot of different detail to their plots. Or it's good for pretty much any story where you start out in the ordinary world and then things pretty quickly start to go wrong. Now, my experience with the W plot was it was one of the first plot structures I was actually introduced to, and it was through a book called The Writer's Time by Kenneth Atchity that I learned a little bit more about this plot and how to use it to structure stories. And it's a fantastic way to get started. But how does that actually work? Well, let's take a look at a plotter file using the W plot structure and see what it looks like. Okay, so you're going to see your five beats here immediately. Okay, we're going to see the trigger event, the first turning point, the second trigger event, the second turning point, and the resolution. And we're going to look at each of these and look at why this looks like a W. To do that, I'm going to switch to a graph method, which wouldn't necessarily be the way I would plot something normally, but I've broken this apart into its parts. Okay, the first one is the trigger event. This is the very beginning of the story. You'll notice that this is not the highest point of the story, and I'll explain how that works in a few minutes as well. In this beginning, this trigger event, you're going to set up the story in the protagonist's ordinary world, which is going to lead to the triggering event, or what we would call the inciting incident, which is an external event that sets the story in motion and usually in a negative direction. For instance, in a romance, this could be the meet cute moment. This could be the moment where the couple meets and things go awkwardly or they don't go well, and things kind of go south from there. And then we don't think things are going to work out. Okay, that would be an example of a triggering event. It can be any number of things. It can be a job loss, an upcoming trip, an invitation to adventure of some sort. For a mystery, it can be actually the committing of a crime, whichever the main crime is going to be that we're going to deal with within this story. Okay, it's the most important event that really sets our story in motion. Okay, usually the action lowers at this point, the drama kind of increases, and there becomes some instant tension, and we head towards the first turning point. So this is part of Act One. The trigger event usually happens around the 10 to 12% mark, and then this entire section should take about 25%, and it brings us down to the first low point in our story. Now, if you look at our diagram here, the line between the trigger event and the first turning point is that diagonal line that forms the first leg of the W. In the first turning point, what happens is this is the first low point in the story. It's not the lowest that things will go, but it looks like the protagonist is not going to attain their goal. They're not going to achieve their goal. In the example we used of the romance, it looks like that the couple is not going to get together. They are not going to make this relationship work. The date didn't go well, whatever happened, and this is a low point in the story. The turning point takes the story in a new positive direction. So, in the example of the romance, something happens that causes the couple to kind of be pushed together, and we think maybe this is going to work out after all. Sometimes that's with the help of friends or allies. Sometimes, in the case of a detective, they get new clues, they get a new partner, something like that. New information comes to light, and the story starts to climb again towards the middle of the book, or what we call the midpoint. So we introduce this low point for the protagonist. This happens right at the very beginning of the act. Then they move upward from there. Okay, this is the next upward leg of the W. The point that we're headed towards is the midpoint of the story, which is also called the second trigger event. This second trigger event can also be called the pop moment. Okay, sometimes that's what it's called in the film industry. It means that, boom, all of a sudden the balloon has been filling up to this point and suddenly it is popped like with a pin. It's a reversal of fortune in the story. Maybe it looked like the couple was going to get together, but one of them had a job transfer that sent them off to Paris, and the other one is stuck in London. And it looks like there's no way that the two are going to get together. It deepens the protagonist's problem or the romance problem. It's something that makes it more likely that the couple is going to stay apart, something that makes it more likely the detective is going to solve the mystery. Maybe his primary suspect wasn't even a suspect after all, or had an alibi, or didn't have a motive, something along that. It's downward action in the story again, and it's headed towards what we're going to see is going to be the lowest moment of the story. We're going to increase our drama and tension here by raising the stakes. And again, the problem gets deeper. So the relationship looks like it's not going to work because physical separation or some other kind of separation occurs, or something else basically shreds what we thought at the midpoint was going to be the protagonist's solution. This is going to lead us to our next down point in the W. This down point is the second turning point. This is the lowest that our protagonist will go. This is often called the dark night of the soul, or the darkest night. Okay, this is the lowest point in the story. Basically, the protagonist has tried and failed to resolve the problem, or the couple has tried to stay together and they are completely unable to do so. And it looks like all hope is lost. The couple is completely separated. All the suspects have essentially been cleared, and there's no hope that the detective is going to solve this case. Maybe the bomb is ticking, and we really don't think there's any hope that our protagonist is going to get there in time to stop it. Okay, so this deepens the problem, raises the stakes. All hope is lost at the end of this moment. This is where Act 2 goes from the midpoint down to that second turning point at the 75% mark. Now, at the end of each of these turning points, we see a tiny glimmer of hope. And that tiny glimmer of hope is what leads us to the last leg of our W. And that leg goes upward to the resolution. Now, notice that I have the resolution at off the chart happiness. Typically, in a W plot, the world starts out ordinary in the beginning. We set up a problem, then we get to the midpoint of our story, then we go down to the darkest night. As we come up to the resolution, because of everything the character has learned and because of the resolution of the problem, things are actually better than they were at the beginning of the story. And this is where the protagonist resolves their problem. They get new hope, ideas, returning allies. The couple somehow manages to come back together or work out a long-term relationship at a distance, something like that. The action kind of rises again if this is an action type of thing. And usually there's a kind of an extra beat in here that doesn't show up on the W, but because of how loose and flexible this story is, you can add your own there. And that epiphany moment is kind of the, oh my, here is the solution moment. The solution is there, it appears, our protagonist and us as the reader see that solution at that moment, and we see this is how things are going to be resolved. That usually happens about the 85 to 90% mark of the book, and then after that we see how our protagonist is going to solve that problem. And then at the end, as part of this resolution, we generally show how our protagonist has grown, or how the issue and the situation has been resolved to the point where now things are much better than they were before. And we can see the protagonist riding off into the sunset, improved with more knowledge, all those kinds of things. Okay, and that's the simplest explanation of the W. Basically, you start at the beginning in the ordinary world, you go down, you come back up again, that rise fails, you go down again, and then you come back up to a happy resolution. And with that, let's look at a practical example of how the W plot structure works. And for this example, we're going to use the movie Shrek. Now, in the movie Shrek, when we look at Shrek's ordinary world, we see that he lives in a swamp with a quite lovely boulder that he's very happy with. So everything starts out just fine. But Lord Farquaad, the evil ruler, banishes all the fairy tale creatures to the woods, including an annoying talking donkey, and they take refuge in Shrek's home, his swamp. So his ordinary world is disrupted, and the trigger event is that these fairy tale creatures basically invade his swamp. Okay, so things go down from there, but then Shrek has a solution. His solution is, I'm going to go find Lord Farquaad, and I'm going to get my swamp back. Well, when he goes and finds Lord Farquaad, he defeats his knights, and he makes a deal. If he goes and rescues this princess from a castle, this Princess Fiona from a castle, and brings her back for Farquaad to marry, then Farquaad will give him his swamp back. It seems like things are going to go easily and go well. Things turn for the good with Shrek. He goes on this journey. The talking donkey convinces him to let him go along with him, and they go to rescue the princess. So things are going well. He thinks this is going to be an easy assignment. He's just going to go pick her up, come back, and he's all done. His swamp is his again. Okay, that's the first turning point. Things go up, but they go upward towards the second trigger event. Now, this one's a little bit trickier with Shrek, because the second trigger event seems like they get to the castle and they're attacked by the dragon. But thanks to Donkey's charm and the fact that Shrek just basically picks up the princess and forcibly removes her from the castle, they escape and they head back home. But really what this turning point is that Fiona is unwilling to go back with him. She doesn't like the way she was rescued. She was supposed to be rescued by her true love, and she fights them every step of the way. Things look like they're going to be a lot tougher for Shrek than they should have been, simply because of how obstinate the princess is and that she doesn't want to go back with him. Now, with that, we come to the second turning point. Now, the second turning point, again in this story, is a little more complicated. Along the way, Fiona's been hiding who she really is. She goes and hides in a windmill at night so that Shrek cannot see that she turns into an ogre after dark. But Shrek confides in Donkey how he hates it when people judge him by his appearance. And Fiona realizes that maybe he's more relatable after all, and she decides to be nice to him. However, they have a period where they're nice to each other, but then towards the end, they have a fight, and Shrek basically turns her over to Lord Farquaad to go and be married, and they've reached the darkest point. The two of them are not going to get together. It's not true love, and it's just not going to work out at all, right? That's really the dark moment. That is the moment where things turn the absolute worst. And the turning point comes when Shrek decides, hey, she actually does like me. She was hiding her feelings, and there is a way for me to go and be together with her, and that's that I go and stop the wedding. That is what starts us off towards the resolution, which is the final part of the story. And as you know, if you've seen the story, is that Donkey uncovers her secret. She's returned to Farquaad. Shrek and Donkey decide they're going back. They're going to stop the wedding. They have adventures along the way. But then Shrek and Fiona share their first kiss. They reveal who they really are. And they live happily for now. See what happens in Shrek 2. That's the end of the movie. So we see that we've got this W shape for Shrek. He goes downward when his swamp is invaded. He goes upward when he thinks it's going to be an easy fix. He goes downward when the fix turns out to be harder than he thought it was going to be. And he goes back upwards when he makes the decision to stop the wedding and to go after Fiona. And that is how the story of Shrek fits with the W plot method. Now, if you would think about using the W plot in your story, or if you've used it before in your story and you'd like to share about that, leave that in the comments below for us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like it, like and subscribe to our channel, and then you will never miss an update. And with that, we'll see you next time.